A team gets trained on Claude Cowork. 2-day workshop. Excellent instructor. Everyone leaves the room confident. They can set up projects, run skills, configure connectors, build agents. 6 weeks later, 3 people are using it. The other 27 are back to their old workflows. This isn't a training failure. The training worked. The training does not produce adoption. CWT 03. Adoption, not training. This is the reframe that separates a service that helps your team learn Cowork from a service that helps your team actually use it. Most AI training in the corporate market is selling the first thing while clients pay for the second. The gap is where the value is. Let's start with what training is good at. Training transmits information. After a well-run training, the learner knows what Cowork is, what it does, how the interface works, where the buttons are. That's a real outcome. It has value. What training does not do is change behavior at scale. It cannot, because behavior change is not a knowledge problem. It's a friction problem, an environment problem, a habit problem. The training was never the bottleneck. The bottleneck was always what happens after Tuesday. Think about every corporate tool rollout you've seen. Someone gets trained, someone signs the licenses, someone runs the kickoff. Then the actual work resumes, and the new tool sits beside it. Optional, requiring extra effort, competing with the workflow that already works fine. This is the gap between knowing a tool exists and using it as the default. The default is what determines adoption, not the training, not the kickoff, not the Slack channel celebrating the launch. The question is which tool a team member reaches for at 3 p.m. on Wednesday when a real piece of work needs doing. Adoption requires 3 things. None of them is training. The first is friction reduction. The new tool has to be easier to reach for than the old one. If Cowork takes more clicks than the workflow it replaces, it loses, regardless of how powerful it is. The second is signal from leadership, not a memo, actual visible use by managers, reflected in how managers ask for work. When a manager asks, "Did you draft that in Cowork?" the team's behavior shifts in a way no training session produces. The third is structured practice, not optional learning, built-in opportunities to use the tool on real work with real stakes in the first 2 weeks after rollout, before the old workflow reasserts itself. Most corporate AI training in 2026 is selling sessions. A trainer comes in, runs a workshop, hands out a slide deck and a prompt library, and leaves. The deliverable is the workshop. The metric is attendance. The follow-up is a post-training survey that measures satisfaction, not behavior change. This is the standard product because it's easy to scope, easy to price, and easy to deliver. It's also why most corporate AI rollouts plateau at about 10% active adoption 6 months in. The product was never engineered to produce the outcome the buyer actually wanted. Adoption engineering looks different. The deliverable isn't a workshop. It's a set of structural changes to how the team operates, with Cowork integrated into the changes. The training is one component of a larger intervention, not the whole intervention. The components. A workflow audit that identifies where Cowork removes the most friction in the team's actual day. A starter set of skills, custom-built to the team's recurring tasks, so day 1 of the rollout is also day 1 of saving time. A management ritual that surfaces Cowork use in stand-ups, retros, or one-to-ones. A 2-week structured practice block where team members are assigned real work that runs through Cowork, with a coach available. And then 6 weeks later, a retrospective that adjusts what's working and discontinues what isn't. This is not a workshop. This is a change program with Cowork as the spine. The buyer asks for training because that's what the market sells. They've seen training catalogs, training vendors, training line items in their budget. The category exists. AI training is on the L&D buyer's drop-down menu of things to procure. AI adoption engineering is not on the drop-down menu yet, so the buyer asks for training, gets training, and then is surprised 6 months later when adoption is low. The vendor delivered what was asked for. The buyer received what was asked for. Both parties are technically satisfied with the contract. The team is still on the old workflows. The opportunity in this market is to be the vendor who doesn't sell what the buyer asked for, who reframes the brief, who shows the buyer that what they actually need has a different shape than what's on their procurement form. The reframe happens in the first conversation. Not after the contract, before. When a buyer asks for cowork training for their team, the answer isn't a price for training. The answer is a question. What does adoption look like for you in 6 months? What percentage of your team running cowork as their default? What categories of work moving through cowork rather than around it? What does the L&D team measure that tells them this worked? Most buyers haven't been asked this. They've been asked which dates work for the workshop. The first vendor who asks the harder question is the vendor who gets to scope a different engagement. The engagement that replaces the workshop has a different shape and a different price. Roughly, a 2-week diagnostic phase where the consultant works alongside the team to map current workflows, identify where cowork removes the most friction, and build a custom skill library for the team's specific recurring tasks. A 4-week implementation phase with structured rollout to a pilot group, management ritual built in, and a coach available for real work questions during the integration period. A 6-week measurement phase where the consultant remains lightly involved while the team operates cowork at default, with a retrospective at the end and adjustments to the skill library based on what the team actually used. That's a 12-week engagement, not a 2-day workshop. The price reflects it. So does the outcome. There's a reason most AI trainers don't offer this. It's harder. It requires understanding the team's actual work, not just the tool. It requires staying engaged for 3 months, not 3 days. It requires producing measurable adoption, not measurable satisfaction. It also requires a different professional posture. The trainer is the expert who teaches. The adoption engineer is the partner who integrates. Trainers can scale by running more workshops. Adoption engineers can't scale that way. The engagement is the work, and the work is bespoke. This is why the lane is wide open. The trainers won't move into it because their business model doesn't support it. The management consultants won't move into it because they don't have the AI fluency. The opening is for an operator who can do both. Read the tool deeply enough to know what's possible. Read the team deeply enough to know what's adoptable. Training is a deliverable. Adoption is an outcome. A buyer who pays for a deliverable and expects an outcome will be disappointed every time. The vendor who recognizes this and sells the outcome instead is the vendor the market rewards. If you're an L&D lead reading this and wondering what it means for your organization, 3 questions are worth running. What did your last AI training actually change about how your team works 6 months later? If the answer is not much, the workshop wasn't wrong. The product category was wrong. When you next procure AI capability for your team, what would it look like to measure adoption rather than attendance? What number, 6 months after the engagement, would tell you it worked? If your current AI training vendor were paid based on adoption rather than session delivery, would they still want the engagement? The answer to that question reveals which side of the line they sit on. The move for an L&D buyer is to stop asking for training and start asking for adoption. Reframe the brief before the procurement form goes out. Specifically, write the procurement spec around outcomes, not deliverables. Adoption percentage at 6 months. Workflow categories migrated. time savings measured, team retention of the practice without coaching. These are the things that matter. Workshop count and attendance numbers are not. Vendors who can deliver against an outcome spec will respond. Vendors who only sell sessions will self-select out. The procurement form is the filter. The next episode of this arc, CWT-04, covers the brief discipline. Cowork's brief is usually taught as a feature. It isn't. The brief is the team operating principle that elevates Cowork from a tool people use to a way the team works. CWT-04 walks through what that looks like and how to make the brief discipline routine across an organization. If you're considering an adoption engagement for your team and want to scope what it would look like, the bespoke service launches in December 2026. Until then, the channel is the operating manual. That's the episode. See you in the next one.